We might get started, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us here today. And it's really great to see some familiar faces, familiar names too, because we're not seeing all your faces. But for those that don't know us, I'm Tanya, and Tamara is with me as well. And we're the co-founders of the TNT Group, which is a leading outsourced paraplanning provider for Australian advice firms. We're completely onshore. To be clear, this isn't a webinar about paraplanning, but it's about advisor capacity and advice efficiency. We've kept you all on mute, and that will be through the presentation, but we do have a question and answer section at the end, so we'll unmute then and we'd love to have a chat. Our session today, as the slide shows, is why are advisors still writing plan requests? So we're going to look at how leading advice firms are removing one of the biggest bottlenecks in the advice process. So is this familiar? Every advisor has experienced this. Imagine it's Monday. You've had a great new client meeting and you know you need it to get it to paraplanning, and you think, you know what, I'll get on to that tomorrow. It's Tuesday, you've got a busy day, heaps of things on, things to do with the team. Wednesday comes around, you have back-to-back review meetings. Then we have Thursday, compliance, training, there could be staff meetings. And then there's Friday. We've got client emails and more reviews. We're totally swamped. And you know what? I'm just going to have to get to that new client paperwork next week. 2 weeks goes by and the file is still sitting on your desk untouched. You know, this isn't poor time management. It's simply a reality. Client work always takes priority over documentation. And it's not that advisors are lazy. It's that important files get pushed back for more urgent tasks.
Okay, so we mentioned the hidden bottleneck that leading firms aren't experiencing compared to others. So here's a typical advice production process that you'll all be very familiar with. So we start with a client meeting and identify that some advice is required. The advisor then completes their meeting file notes and collates the fact-find information. The strategy is then formulated, a brief or a plan request is written, and that's sent off to the paraplanner. Plan is produced by that paraplanner and then comes back to the practice to be checked and presented by the advisor. So where's the bottleneck in this process? We seem to be, as an industry, making some pretty good progress with our meeting file notes, with different AI tools and tech. And usually we've now got some support staff now collecting the fact-find information. On the paraplanning side, most firms have spent time finding a good paraplanning partner, and just on that, everyone seems to be obsessing over paraplanning turnaround times. And I mean, so do we. We've built a business on our commitment to a 5-day paraplanning timeframe. But what about the time it takes before the file even reaches paraplanning? In our experience, almost every file waits for one person. And the file can spend weeks with the advisor waiting for them to have a few spare hours to complete this step of pulling together their strategy, writing their brief and their plan request, and actually getting that file to paraplanning. So the advisor has quietly become the bottleneck. Most firms don't actually have a paraplanning bottleneck, they have a pre-paraplanning bottleneck. But what we're seeing is that high-performing firms don't seem to have this problem. They value their advisor time too highly, and so they're outsourcing this step to their paraplanner. And this is what we call strategy support. We're going to refer to this process of strategy support throughout the rest of this session. So we want to make that clear exactly what we're talking about here. Now, as a business at TNT, we've been offering outsourced strategy support for many, many years now. And it's basically just like having an in-house associate that does all of the pre-para planning work for you. So everything we've circled there is done for you by the para planner. All the advisor needs to send is their file note and their fact find. That's it. The clients that we have that are using this service tell us that it saves them 3 to 4 hours per plan alongside weeks in their overall advice process. Now, 3 or 4 hours is a significant amount of time to be spent on every file before it's even in the hands of your para planner. Is this really the best use of your advisor's time? And does it create the most value for your business? Hopefully you think no to that, but we're going to explain why it doesn't. So here's what we see advisors are uniquely positioned to do. So they're in a great position to be building trust with their clients, and that's what they should be doing. Clients don't pay thousands of dollars to their advisor because they can model their strategy in Xplan. They pay their fees because they trust in their advisor's judgment and in their relationship. They should be focusing their time on understanding clients, so they're in a good position to do this. Understanding what your clients' dreams are and what their worries are is something that you really can't put a price on. They're there to ask great questions. Most strategy problems are uncovered by asking better questions, not by running even more modelling. And they certainly have value in delivering recommendations to their clients to make their clients confident in the strategies that we're recommending. On the other side, what is consuming far too much time for advisors that we're seeing? Certainly working through every technical strategy, running modelling, documenting everything, and also certainly writing plan requests. Now, we've all heard the analogy before about letting the surgeons do surgery. Imagine a senior surgeon spending an hour every afternoon sterilising their instruments. We know they're perfectly capable of doing it, but in reality, that wouldn't happen. A surgeon's not going to do that. They know that their time is too valuable. But we see advice businesses do this every day. And if you've partnered with experienced paraplanners, why would you only involve them after you've already done 90% of the thinking? All right.
To look at a better way to advice production. Most firms today run their advice just like this. The advisor will develop the strategy, and that will take around 90 minutes. He will then write the plan request, and that could take around 90 minutes. And we know, a lot of you don't take that long, but when you have phone calls, you're interrupted, there could be other distractions. By the time it actually gets off your desk, it's around 90 minutes. And then the paraplanning starts. But within that time, the advisor is clarifying inconsistencies, and that could be up to 10 minutes. So in this scenario, the advisor goes away, he works in isolation. It could be up to 3 hours, sometimes longer. And it's only once they've solved the strategy that the paraplanner becomes involved. Now we're going to look at how our clients do it differently. The advisor, his initial thinking time around the client scenario and their needs after the meeting, around 10 minutes. And then he has a strategy discussion with the paraplanner. That can take around 10 minutes, phone call or Teams. The paraplanner then goes away and develops a strategy and puts a plan request together at a cost of around $140. That then comes back to the advisor and he reviews it around 10 minutes. And then the paraplanning starts. So in this scenario, after the meeting there, the advisor already knows the client objectives, the issues, where they're leaning. What they don't necessarily know is every strategy that's worth considering, or every modelling assumption, or the most technical, robust approach. And that's where that strategy support or discussion comes in, that 10-minute conversation with the paraplanner. That's where we ask the questions and we challenge the assumptions and we discuss alternatives. We identify modelling and we think through the strategy together. And then by the end of the conversation, we've usually produced a stronger outcome than either person could have achieved working alone. Your advisor shouldn't have to solve every strategy before the paraplanner gets involved. Now, what we're really going to look at now is the power of the relationship of the advisor and paraplanner working together in time and also money. So the first scenario, we've got the advisor time over 3 hours, but in the second scenario, we have a total advisor time of just 30 minutes. Now, what does that mean if we were to convert that time to billable hours, where there could be new client engagements and new revenue? We know in the industry today that an advisor's average charge out rate is $400. So consider how that impacts the opportunity cost. 3 hours of advisor time in the first scenario, that opportunity cost is $1,200. Compared to in the second scenario, we've only used 30 minutes, half an hour of advisor time, which is $200, plus the $140 of strategy or paraplanner involvement earlier in the strategy, $340 total. And that's just on one piece of advice. That is huge. So what impact does that have over a whole year? Let's have a look. So the opportunity. We see on average around 6 plan requests per advisor per month. Now, 6 plan requests taking 3 hours each equals 18 advisor hours per month. What does that equate to in a year? That's nearly 200 advisor hours, time that could be spent with clients, prospects, or coaching staff. Now, if we were to convert that time to seeing more clients, and we know that every client takes around 4 hours a year to service, so 200 advisor hours could convert to 50 new clients per advisor. And if we look at possibly an average advice fee of $5,500, there's revenue there of $275,000 that's a possibility, an incredible impact to the capacity of just one advisor, but also a huge uplift in revenue for the practice.
Okay, so saving the advisor's time is, of course, a fantastic outcome, but it's really only half of the story we're telling here. So the bigger win is what it does to your advice process. With strategy support, every client file starts moving almost immediately instead of sitting in a queue that nobody's really measuring. Most firms measure paraplanning turnaround times, but very few measure how long a file spends sitting on an advisor's desk before paraplanning even begins. And that's often where the biggest delay exists. And that's what we call the black hole, usually about a 14-day black hole. So a file sitting on an advisor's desk is in a black hole, it's not moving. The client's expecting progress, the power plan is ready to go, but nothing happens until the advisor finds those spare few hours to get that file going. So the fastest way to deliver advice isn't making your power planning faster, it's getting the file into power planning sooner. So what does it look like traditionally? Day 1, we have a client meeting. Days 2 to 14, the file sits in the black hole waiting for the advisor to keep it going. Maybe by day 15, the plan request is completed and then sent off to power planning, and power planning starts on about day 16. With a strategy support model, client meeting happens on day 1. Within 48 hours, you have that 10-minute strategy meeting call with the power planner. So that happens by day 3. And then within another 24 hours, the power planning is already underway. So that's a pretty big difference there from our traditional scenario, saving you a couple of weeks, sometimes longer. We know some practices that take more than 2 weeks to get that file in the power planning queue, particularly if there's a backlog. Okay, so at this point, some of you might be thinking, okay, this all sounds great, but surely I, as the advisor, still need to own the advice. You know, where's my responsibility to my clients to be creating that strategy and putting it all together? And yes, you do, as the advisor, still own the advice. Strategy support changes the workflow and makes you far more productive, but it doesn't change the responsibility. So the advisor still owns the client relationship, owns the recommendations, reviews every strategy before it goes into the SOA itself, and obviously signs off on every piece of advice. Strategy support simply helps get there faster. This is probably an interesting conversation we have with many advisors too, around where their value lies, and we've touched on it, but you know, these are the parts that the clients value, as we mentioned, which is around building trust, building that relationship. They really don't care who's sitting behind the scenes doing the wealth solvers or doing the modelling. That doesn't have to be the advisor. It really shouldn't be the advisor if we want to be running as profitably as we could be.
So in summary, what we've shown you today is, firstly, traditional firms treat paraplanners as document writers. So basically it's just data in and data out. High-performing firms, though, treat paraplanners as technical partners. And the strategy support brings that technical expertise into the process earlier, when it has the greatest impact. So how would this change our client experience? Well, imagine if every client, firstly, entered paraplanning within 24 hours of the client meeting. Secondly, they started with a complete strategy brief. They had stronger strategies through advisor and paraplanner collaboration. They required fewer questions and less rework. And lastly, it freed your advisors to spend more time advising. Really, what would that mean for your business?
Okay, well, we want to be short and sharp today and keep you all moving. We know you're all busy. So again, the point of today's webinar wasn't that advisors can't write plan requests. It's that the best advice comes from getting the right people involved at the right time. And if today's discussion has challenged the way that you might think about when paraplanners should become part of the advice process, then we've achieved what we set out to do. So thank you for joining us today. We've got about 7 or 8 minutes left. If anybody has any questions, feel free to post them in the chat window or to unmute yourself, or I might need to unmute you. Must have explained it perfectly, Tan.
Well, it's great to see you all. Anyway, we've really enjoyed presenting. We get asked a lot about our strategy support, and especially in a world of advisors that there is so much work out there. There is so much more organic growth in the practices that we see, but just not enough advisors to take it all on. So this is a wonderful opportunity to be able to do it better and see our practices grow as well as our advisors. So thanks everyone for being on with us today.
Just one question from Andrea. What about insurance plans, i.e. quotes? So, and you're using the service already, but it's great, but our bottleneck is around insurance work. So yes, often the difficulty with insurance quotes is that because there are so many different options and selections that can be made, and it's quite practice specific, often the quotes will remain at the practice side instead of at our side. But if you're seeing that there's a bottleneck there, then happy to have a chat about that, Andrea, to see if we can shift that and bring that into the strategy work side of things as well. So we can certainly have a look at that and get Della to reach out to discuss that further. To get more info, we just call, feel free to respond to the meeting invite, Peter, if you like, and we can set up a time for a quick chat to be able to talk through how it might work for your practice. That's probably the best way to do it. Everyone's a little bit bespoke in terms of how they want it to work and when TNT gets involved. It's certainly not a one size fits all, but absolutely we can say for those practices using it, they're all seeing huge benefits, huge time savings. And no one will, they all say we'll never go back to the old way of doing it. So that's, it tells us that it's working. They're saving themselves a lot of time. Wonderful.
Hey.
Thanks everyone for joining us today. We'll send out a copy of the recording too if others in your team would like to catch up on it.
Thank you.